Like a grand and miraculous spaceship, our planet has sailed through the universe of time.
Like a grand and miraculous spaceship.
Grand and miraculous.
Grand and miraculous.
I think with the Muppets, there's sort of an innocence to them, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that appeals to the child in everybody. Because I think everybody is a child in everybody, still.
Well, we all want to build a time machine, Doc. So when you enter Disneyland, you're entering a time machine.
I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse.
The most critical condition when you start with nothing. Just always remember that, with nothing. And nothingness is something. There is no nothing. Blackness, void is something. It's space. And when you introduce the first element, you better bring in the right element. It's much easier with the Dolly Street. You clutter it up so with columns and curlicues and Victorian ornamentation that nobody knows what to look at, huh? That's the easy one to do. The tough one is, give me a black stage anytime and bring the piece on. And then you'll find, boy, you get that weak feeling in your stomach, because whether it be a column or a symbol or a shape or a person or an animal or whatever it is that you bring on that stage, you're on the spot. And your ability as a designer at that moment, I think, is really showing. Huh?
That was my grandfather, John F. DeCuir Sr. He said that to the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences while giving a lecture. He was talking about production design at the time, about how a filmmaker can reach his audience, about what happens when you start with nothing and you introduce the first element. But he could have been describing something else entirely. A dark room, an 84-foot dome, 12 DeLorean time machines on hydraulic pistons, and the moment that the projector ignites and the image wraps past the edges of your vision, and there's no frame, and there's no screen, and for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, you're really there.
In the meantime, Stanley Kubrick came to London and heard about our machine and said, I think that's pretty good, and called me up and said, we heard about your machine, John. Is it possible to use it? And I went up to London, we talked about it. Anyway, that machine was used on 2001. And to date, some of the shots in that film, I think, are landmark shots. They're shots where people are standing in sets that don't exist. Objects are flying through space in free motion, where people are put into the flying objects. And that is as difficult a shot as you can ever do. To lock it off and put them in is one thing, but to move And while you're in motion, put the object in that doesn't exist and put the people in it. That means playback. That means repeat motion. That means you might have to do it 15 or 20 times before all the pieces so that the guns fire at the right time for the flash, for the crash, whatever happens. Huh?
Now, the machine he's talking about was a special effects camera. This was a device that could place a real actor into an imaginary world. Now, you could film someone sitting in a chair and make it look like they were standing on the surface of the moon, for example. Now, my grandfather built it with British effects artist named Wally Weavers in Madrid in 1963. This camera was mounted on a gun turret from an English bomber. The funding came from Albert Cubby Broccoli, who you may know as the James Bond producer. He wrote a check for $200,000 right on the spot. And when Stanley Kubrick borrowed that machine for 2001: A Space Odyssey, one of the young men who came to work on it was this man.
We had a young man come and work on our crew. His name was Doug Trumbull. He worked with us. He later came back and started to build his own machines in his own shop, which he has here now. As you know, Dykstra, where John worked with him, and the mushrooms started to grow. This thing has come up.
Now, that was my grandfather, and the young man he's talking about, the one who worked on his machine, then went off to build his own, spent the rest of his life trying to answer one question. What if you were really there? Not watching, not observing, but there. He asked it with a slit of light in a London studio. He asked it with 70 millimeter film at 60 frames a second. He asked it from a farm in Massachusetts where Hollywood couldn't find him. And in 1991, in a windowless building at Universal Studios, Florida, inside an 8-story OMNIMAX dome, he finally answered it. This is Grand and Miraculous. I'm your host, John, and this is a story of Back to the Future, the ride. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This is our 32nd episode. It's hard to believe. But I don't want to pop into chat and say hi to some good folks. I saw so many people getting so excited about this episode, and I know it means so much to so many people. I hope I do it justice. I want to say hi to folks in chat like Miss Kate. Hello, Kate. Hope you're doing great. Cruising Theme Park Guide. Sierra's in the house. Thank you for being here. Karen Cook is in the house. Hello, Karen. Movie Mania Nick. I saw that you got super excited about this episode. I'm so grateful that you're here. Let's see, scrolling up, Amusement Park Pirates. It's me, David T. Thank you, David T, for being here. I really appreciate it. Let's see who else is in the house here. Dave Stragand is here. What a shock. We'll talk to you soon, Dave. Let's see. Mattercam Matt was in here really early. Thank you, Matt, for being here. I really appreciate all your support. I saw Miss Debbie Bernfeld in here. I saw Lamont Gray. I'm super grateful for both of you. You've been here from the very beginning. And of course, I saw Miss K Bell, my stepmom. Hope you're doing great. Hope Dad's lurking around. And Alyssa Neal's in the house. Hello, Neil. Thank you for being here. Julie Gerbil, thank you for being here too. I appreciate it. Now let me just acknowledge the situation that we have here. I know there's an important speech going on. It means the world to me that you're here. If you do need to go and watch that thing, I won't take offense. All I ask is that you come back and you give this episode a like, a subscribe, and share it out. That would make my day. However, if you want to hang out, we're going to have lots of fun talking about this wonderful attraction. And for those of you who have never been or have never seen this show before, let me tell you a little bit about what we do here. The purpose of this series is to unveil the magic behind theme park attractions, exploring their creators, their immersive worlds, and the moments that keep us coming back with your voice shaping the journey. Now, as I do at the beginning of every episode, I like to drop a little bit of trivia and see how many people can get it. This one's a little tough. Let's see how it works. So tonight's trivia is, of course, about Back to the Future, the ride. In the ride's pre-show, when you're waiting in the queue, who was originally supposed to be the main antagonist? We all know that Biff Tannen was the main antagonist, the main enemy of the attraction. But there was someone else who was supposed to be the main antagonist before writer Peyton Reed intervened, and he insisted on using Biff Tannen. If you think you know, drop it in chat. If you don't think you know, drop it in chat anyway, and we'll have fun talking about it. And speaking of chat, please do share your memories. This is a community-based show. It's not just me spouting off for 60 minutes. It's all about what you think as well. So please do keep in mind that chat is there for you to drop all those memories in. And of course, please go to our website, www.grandandmiraculous.show. The entry code tonight is BIFF, B-I-F-F. I encourage everybody to go to the website either during or after the show, register your vote, and over time we can start to see what the community feeling is about these great attractions. All right, let's see here. Let me pop back into chat, see if I missed anyone. Mr. Paul Engel is in the house. Hello, Paul. Thank you for being here. All right. Let's get to it, shall we? So, now, if you were with us last time on the last episode, you may remember this. June 1986, the debut of the King Kong encounter on the Universal Studios Hollywood backlot. We talked about this quite a bit last week. Bob Gurr's masterpiece, a 30-foot, 7-ton animatronic gorilla, the biggest and most complex ever built. The ride that would prove that Universal could compete with Disney after all. Now, on the day Kong debuted, 2 men were inside the attraction programming the figure. Their names were Peter Alexander and Craig Barr. Now, Alexander in particular was a director of shows and special effects at Universal. And then there was a golf cart that pulled up, and inside the golf cart was someone you all know very well, Mr. Steven Spielberg. And Peter Alexander said at the time, quote, "All of a sudden, a guy who had been my college roommate, Steven Spielberg, shows up in a golf cart. I hadn't seen him in 10 years. Well, Spielberg had a story to tell. He had just been to Disneyland, where his friend George Lucas had taken him on a ride called Star Tours. This was a new Star Wars flight simulator, as we all know. Well, Lucas was very proud of it. He was proud enough to make a point. Spielberg told Alexander what Lucas had said, that Universal, quote, could never do a Star Tours, that Spielberg should give all his theme park ideas to Disney because they were the only ones who could execute them. And then Steven Spielberg said 6 words that would change theme park history. He said, "I want something better than Star Tours." He told Alexander to take Back to the Future, the 1985 blockbuster about a teenager and the eccentric scientist and a time-traveling DeLorean, and see what he could do with it. Well, the dare was made. Universal against Disney. Spielberg against Lucas. And a man named Peter Alexander was now the one who had to deliver. Now, Alexander's first concept was a hybrid, something like what The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man would eventually become. This would be a ride with 3D theater moments, fast sections, roller coaster ending. His boss, Barry Upson, took one look at the budget, though, and he said, "Gosh, this is going to cost $50 million. We're never going to be able to build anything like this." So Alexander had to think differently. He thought back to working in the 1970s at Hughes Aerospace in Culver City, where they had a Singer simulator for the F-111B fighter jet. Now, this was a machine that made pilots feel like they were flying when they were sitting still. And he thought, what if someone made a dome screen that was even bigger than that? Big enough for maybe 100 people at a time. Well, he called Greg McGillivray, one of the hottest and biggest IMAX filmmakers in the world, and he told him about a format called OMNIMAX. This was a domed fisheye projection system, and what it did was that it wrapped the image around the audience. So when Alexander presented the idea to Jay Stein, his boss's boss, one of Universal's most powerful executives, Stein was blunt. He said, A, that will never work, and B, if it would have, somebody would have come up with it already. It's too simple. So Alexander had to prove it. What they did was that they rented the OMNIMAX Dome at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas for a single day. They mocked up car bodies out of poster board, of all things, on a platform above the seats. They strung together point-of-view IMAX footage from Greg McGillivray. Nothing fancy, cardboard and borrowed film. But when the footage started playing and they were sitting in that cardboard car, they were flying. Jay Stein was convinced at that point. So they had a concept. They needed someone to execute it. They hired Richard Edlund, an Academy Award-winning visual effects artist, to do the effects. Greg McGillivray, he would shoot the background IMAX footage from a helicopter. Well, it fell apart almost immediately. McGillivray, it turned out, he doesn't fly. He didn't go up in the helicopter. The footage came back very jittery and unstable. And Edlund? Well, Alexander walked in one day and he discovered that Edlund had rewritten the entire script without telling anyone. When Alexander confronted him, Edlund said, "We didn't like your script, so we threw it out." Well, Jane Stein saw the dailies. He left the room without a word. Then he called Alexander and screamed at him about what an idiot he was for letting this happen. Alexander finally said, "Well, do you want me to quit?" And Jay Stein said, "No, we're going to find someone else to do the film." So the ride that was supposed to beat Star Tours couldn't even get off the ground. Now, there was a name. Everyone in visual effects knew this name. A man who had created some of the most extraordinary images in the history of cinema. A man who could build things no one else could build. But there was a problem. Alexander went to Spielberg and, well, he said the name. Steven Spielberg's response was immediate. Quote, "Absolutely not. Find someone else. Not that guy. He really screwed me over. I gave him all the special effects on Close Encounters, and he was taking forever, and he wouldn't show me anything. He bushwhacked me. I will never hire that guy again. Never." The name was Douglas Trumbull. Now, there are two versions of what happened next, and the people who lived through it still disagree about it. Peter Alexander says that he suggested to Spielberg, "Well, what if you don't have to talk to Douglas?" And Spielberg relented. "If I don't have to see this guy, go for it." Well, Sherry McKenna, the producer who would become one of the ride's fiercest champions, she tells it a little bit differently. "That didn't happen at all," she said. McKenna claims that she fired the previous director and hired Trumbull herself. When Jay Stein objected, quote, "You can't hire Douglas. Steven and he don't get along," unquote. McKenna went directly to Spielberg. She says he was fine with it. It was no big deal. Phil Hedema, who took over as producer, confirms McKenna's significance. Quote, "Sherry McKenna was critically important because she was responsible for getting Doug Trumbull onto the project. That was a huge, incredibly significant turning point. I can absolutely say that this attraction wouldn't have been anything like it was without Doug Trumbull. So however it happened, the result was the same. Douglas Trumbull was in. But who was this man? And why had Hollywood's most brilliant visual effects artist ended up on a farm in Massachusetts, 3,000 miles from the industry that needed him? Well, Douglas Hunt Trumbull, he was born on April 8th, 1942 in Los Angeles. His father, Donald, was an aerospace engineer who had briefly worked in Hollywood creating visual effects for the 1939 Wizard of Oz, in fact. His mother was an artist as well. She died when Doug was 7. As a child, he built crystal set radios and loved alien invasion movies. He wanted to be an architect, in fact. He studied technical drawing at El Camino Junior College. And when he tried to break into Hollywood with a portfolio full of spaceship and planetary drawings, Hollywood rejected him. He got a job at a small studio called Graphics Films, and this studio made documentaries for NASA and the Air Force. He had photorealistic art, and it was good enough for government work, if not for the movies itself. In 1964, Graphic Films produced a short film called To the Moon and Beyond for the New York World's Fair. Trumbull painted a rotating spiral galaxy, and he projected it using a fisheye lens onto a custom-built dome. The effect was completely groundbreaking. It caught the attention of Stanley Kubrick, in fact, who was beginning work on a little film called 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, when Kubrick decided to move all production to England and he canceled the Graphics Films contract, Trumbull cold called him. He got Kubrick's home phone number from a colleague. The director hired him and flew him to London. Douglas Trumbull was 23 years old at the time. His first task was creating the dozens of data display animations in the spacecraft interiors. The screens in the Ares shuttle and the Discovery, well, they look like computer graphics. They were actually photographed charts and graphs animated with Rube Goldberg-like contraptions he'd built from gears and motors ordered from random scientific equipment catalogs. Well, Kubrick gave him extraordinary freedom. He would say, "What do you need?" And I'd say, "Well, I need to go into town and buy some weird bearings and some stuff." And he would send me off to town in his Bentley with his driver. It was great. And then came the sequence, the Stargate. Trumbull invented a technique called slit scan photography. This was a 6-foot tall sheet of rotatable metal with a narrow slit cut into it. Behind the slit was a 12-foot backlit glass panel with artwork. Things like abstract paintings, photographic enlargements, with the camera making basically a long, slow exposure. And the artwork moved horizontally while light streamed through the slit. Well, the result was unlike anything. It was a kaleidoscope of light that appeared to be darting towards you from a single point. A tunnel of color and geometry that felt like falling through the universe. If you haven't seen 2001, you should definitely check out this sequence on YouTube. Each frame, in fact, took about 4 to 5 minutes to capture, so the machine ran 24 hours a day for months. Now, when audiences saw it in 1968, they had never experienced anything like this. The Stargate didn't just take you or just show you a journey through space. It made you feel like you were taking that trip. Again, what if you were really there? Trumbull had asked this question for the first time. He was 25. Well, as you all know, the film won the Academy Award for Best Special Effects. The award, unfortunately, went solely to Stanley Kubrick. Trumbull's name was not on it. Well, he said, Kubrick did not create the visual effects. He directed them. Well, there were all sorts of legal threats, and the two men didn't speak for a decade after that. At 25, Douglas Trumbull changed what cinema could be. At 26, someone else took the credit. What followed, though, was a decade of the most extraordinary visual effects work in the history of Hollywood. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977, for Steven Spielberg. This was the same Spielberg who would later swear never to hire Trumbull again. 3 Academy Award nominations. Star Trek, the motion picture, 1979. This was a rescue job. The original effects house had been fired after failing to produce even a single usable shot. Well, Trumbull took over with 6 months until the release date. 650 effects shots, as many as Close Encounters and Star Wars combined. He worked 7 days a week, around the clock. He ended up in the hospital, ulcers, exhaustion. And then, Blade Runner, 1982 for Ridley Scott. Trumbull created the iconic opening image of a dystopian Los Angeles. This was a landscape of industrial refinery stretching to the horizon, built from acid-etched brass silhouettes on a 15 by 8 foot table with 7 miles of fiber optic strands providing the city's lights. Now, he'd sworn off working for other directors, but the chance to build something that wasn't just sterile gray and white spacecraft was irresistible. And alongside all of this, Trumbull was developing his own invention called ShowScan. 70 millimeter film projected at 60 frames a second. This was 2.5 times the standard. Now, this was an image so sharp, so vivid, so overwhelmingly present that he called it a super intense kind of virtual reality. He brought ShowScan to the studios. Well, the answer was no. It was too expensive, too impractical. Theater owners would never install new equipment. What if you were really there? He'd found the answer, and the industry said, we don't want it. Brainstorm was supposed to be his vindication, his second film as director, a story about a device that would record and transmit human experience. This was a movie about the question that he'd been asking his entire career. And it was supposed to be shot in show scan. Well, MGM said no. Shoot it at 24 frames per second like anyone else. Then, on November 28th, 1981, the film star, Natalie Wood, drowned during a break in production. MGM tried to kill the film, not because it couldn't be finished. Natalie Wood's scenes were largely complete, but because the studio was going broke, and a $15 million insurance payout on an unfinished film was worth more to them than finishing the film and releasing it, as sad as that is. Trumbull fought. He locked himself in the vault with a negative. Why should they pay an insurance claim for something that wasn't really damaged goods, he said. Well, Lloyd's of London investigated. They found that MGM was acting in bad faith. They put up the money to finish the film. Brainstorm was released on September 30th, 1983. This was almost 2 years after Wood's death. Critical praise, but commercial failure. Trumbull was done. Movie making is like waging war, he said. It destroys your personal life, too. I have no interest in doing another Hollywood feature film, he said. Absolutely none. The movie business is so totally screwed up that I just don't have the energy to invest 3 or 4 years into a feature film.
But sometimes, you're going along on a film and you want to accomplish something and you're forced into the corner. Huh? You're forced there where you have to do something. Huh? You have to generate some steam. You have to get the right people together. And because of that, things happen.
Well, in 1987, Douglas Trumbull retreated to the Berkshire Hills of western Massachusetts. This was a 50-acre estate in New Marlborough, as far as Hollywood as he can get while staying in the country. He went there to escape what he called the lawyers, the insurance agents, the creeps. He told the Berkshire Eagle, the kind of work I like to do is experimental, and it takes a lot of time. In LA, the entire business is geared for mass production. I've been looking for an opportunity to slow down and have the chance to experiment inexpensively. But he hadn't stopped building. In 1986, from his rural retreat, Trumbull created something called Tour of the Universe at the CN Tower in Toronto. Now, this was the world's first large-scale flight simulator ride. Show scan, 70 millimeters at 60 frames a second. 40 passengers in a shuttlecraft cabin. Set in the year 2019, guests went through futuristic customs clearance, received inoculations against fictional space diseases, and then launched through the hollow core of the CN Tower. It cost $10 million. 2 million people rode it. Now, for the first time, Trumbull had taken his audiences somewhere, not shown them a movie, not projected images onto a flat screen. He put them into a cabin and convinced their bodies that they were moving. They weren't passive, they were participants. What if you were really there? He'd proved it could work. Not in a movie theater, in a tower in Toronto. And then the phone rang. Steven Spielberg needed someone to do the impossible. And the one man who could was hiding on a farm in Massachusetts. I saw some good friends pop into chat I want to say hi to. I see Kate E in the chat. Hello, Kate. Mark Langenkamp, thank you for being here. I think I saw Thad, Theme Park Giant. Hey, Thad, thanks for being here. And I said hi to Paul. I think that's it for now. If I didn't catch you, please let me know. And I will say, oh, Miss Bitritz too. Bitritz, thank you for being here. Again, let me know if you have any thoughts on anything we've talked about so far in chat. And if you haven't already, please do hit the like and subscribe and share it out. Let's go back to my grandfather.
And believe me, we all know there isn't anything that can't be done. There isn't anything that can't be done that can be put on a piece of paper, that can be made into a model or into a concept. So you have to get that concept, and then you have to dig in. You have to bring these people in, and you have to talk to them, and you have to control it.
There isn't anything that can't be done. There isn't anything that can't be done that can be put on a piece of paper. Well, Trumbull set up his effects studio in the former Monument Mills complex in Housatonic, Massachusetts, an old textile mill from the industrial era. Red brick, high ceilings. This was a kind of building where a century earlier that workers had actually woven cloth. Now they would weave something else. When the project began, there were about 6 people who worked at the mill. Within 6 months, the company employed 250. Eugene Sills, the former director of administration, remembered, now this wasn't a great economic time, so it had a significant impact. There was a lot of money coming into the Berkshires. Well, Trumbull knew from the start that he needed something no effects studio had ever had, his own testing theater. This was a quarter-scale OMNIMAX dome, an OMNIMAX projector, and one of the actual DeLorean ride vehicles installed at the facility so that his team could test every shot against the real experience. When Universal's executives heard this, they balked. The cost, the impracticality, a dome and a ride vehicle and a textile mill in rural Massachusetts. Then came the meeting. Sidney Sheinberg, Lou Wasserman, Steven Spielberg. The executives were very skeptical. But Spielberg, the man who had sworn never to work with Trumbull, he looked at them and said, if there's one planet on the person who I trust to do stuff that we don't know how to do, it's Doug. Everything at that moment was approved. And the man who swore he'd never hire Trumbull again had become his champion. Now, the year was 1989 at this point. Computer animation was in its infancy. It was not remotely capable of producing images at OMNIMAX resolution. This was 15 perforation, 70 millimeter film, a frame 10 times larger than standard 35 millimeters. Douglas Trumbull made the decision that defied this ride. The entire 4-minute, 11-second film would be shot with physical models and miniatures. 0 computer-generated imagery. Everything built by hand.
I could tell you, I think, a couple of very comical stories of some of these things and their mysteries. You see, I know that because I worked in back at the Black Doors for a number of years at Universal. After Mr. Lawson left, I kept that going. And I had the same Black Doors, and I wouldn't let anyone go back in there. And I built all the tubes and all the machines and all the gimmicks that Mr. Whitlock now has at Universal now. And he still has his back room is still locked up. And just think, you know, when you think from Systrom in 1907, who had the Black Doors, and he locked them. And then who was it next? I think there was a chap in between before Lawson, and Lawson locked the Black Doors, and then I had them, and now Whitlock has them. I think it's time, really, somebody opens the doors and shows you what's back there. All there is a few pipes back there, you know, and a few gears. Really, there's a few gears and a few little things that they do. And some of them are pretty tricky, pretty nice.
Now, my grandfather, he talked about these black rooms. These were locked workshops at Universal and other studios where impossible things were built. Generation after generation of visual effects artists working behind black doors, making magic from pipes and gears, as he said. Well, Trumbull's textile mill at the Berkshires was the next one in the chain, except instead of a few pipes and gears, it held 20 by 40 foot miniature cities, a 7-foot animatronic dinosaur, and cameras that had not existed 6 months earlier. Now, because of the extraordinary resolution demanded by the OMNIMAX format, these miniatures became some of the biggest models that have ever been produced in the history of the motion picture industry. Well, let me take you inside the textile mill. Future Hill Valley, the 2015 cityscape, was built entirely in miniature. The buildings were as tall as half a grown man, maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, studded with thousands of tiny lights to sell the illusion of scale. The camera rode on a motion-controlled boom that extended straight out onto the set, so the audience would feel like they were flying through the streets. When the DeLorean crashes through neon signs, those are the cuts, the points where one shot ended and the next began. And here's a fun detail that became legend. Someone on the crew left a styrofoam coffee cup sitting on the miniature clock set. Nobody noticed it during filming, In fact, on the final ride, if you looked towards the right as you approached the courthouse, there it was, a coffee cup that appeared to be 1 story tall. It became one of the ride's most beloved Easter eggs. Now, the Ice Age was one of the bigger sets. The crew used fiberglass so that they could capture that kind of internal glow that ice has, the way light passes through it, And the crevice, the textile mill's floors weren't deep enough. So what they did was that they actually broke open holes in the floors through 2, sometimes 3 levels of the building to get the proper depth. The lava from the volcanic sequence was made from methyl cellulose. This is a food ingredient used in things like ice cream. Well, it looked very convincing under the sets and under the lights. But under the lights, unfortunately, being food, it also went rancid. Arish Faizi, Trumbull's camera operator and project manager, he had a quote, "The whole place would stink." Now, the dinosaurs were animatronic figures, but they moved super slow during filming, maybe 2 frames per second. They had to stay perfectly in sync with the motion control camera, which was also crawling. Played back at normal speed, the T-Rex, about 7 feet tall, he looked ferociously fast, but 2 frames a second became a prehistoric nightmare. And Biff's DeLorean, the one that you're chasing for the whole ride, was a detailed model about 18 inches long, mounted on a wire rig. Now, it was crucial to the experience in a way that went beyond story. As Irish Faizi says, the audience's attention on it makes it easier on the rider physiologically. Without that, people would get motion sick much more quickly because they wouldn't know what to look at on the screen. But by having that car in front of them, you could focus on it and you wouldn't get sick. The little car you were chasing was also keeping your lunch down. So there was rancid lava, there was holes in the floor, coffee cups on miniature clock towers. This was the unglamorous reality of making magic. Now, there was a fundamental problem that no one had solved before. Nobody had ever done visual effects for fisheye OMNIMAX lenses. These cameras and the motion control equipment used in standard visual effects work would literally be caught in the frame, visible to the audience. The OMNIMAX fisheye lens sees everything around it. So they had to make cameras and motion control heads that didn't exist. The ride film became the first OMNIMAX film to feature stop motion animation, the first to successfully integrate a motion base with simultaneously filmed content in perfect sync. And it pioneered a technology, I'll get into jargon a little bit, called frequency injection. Sound waves were actually pumped into the DeLorean's hydraulic systems, enabling each vehicle to physically mimic terrain. Cobblestones, for example, felt like cobblestones. Ice felt like ice. Volcanic rock felt like volcanic rock. It was a cycle, in fact. Build, shoot, test, fix, repeat. After each shot, even rough passes, the team would go into the quarter-scale dome with a DeLorean motion base, watch the footage, and program the vehicle's response. Then they would go back to the set, reshoot, test again. Quote, "It's something that you have to do before lunch." When the programming wasn't synced yet, the motion sickness came real fast. Sherry McKenna says, "Programming a ride like that is a bitch, but they did such good work. I test drove it a lot in the Berkshires because I'm a fanatic and because I get motion sick. They always like me to be the test case."
So all of a sudden, I can start working on you on taste, on smell. I can affect all of your senses because those are the avenues. Those are the only ways that I can get to you, and to not use them is wasteful. And to always keep saying, I'm going to do it with a visual. I'm going to put the black there. I'm going to put the white there. Think about it once in a while. Take your last picture and see if you've used the other senses in relation to design to help solve the situation.
Now, my grandfather said that decades before the Back to the Future ride opened. He was talking about cinema, about how a designer reaches through the screen to grab the audience. But Douglas Trumbull built the machines to fulfill the philosophy. There was wind, water, smoke, 10,000 watts of sound transmitted through 72 million holes in the screen, hydraulic frequency injection that made the floor beneath you feel like a different world, an 84-foot dome that surrounded you so completely that the screen ceased to exist. Every avenue, every sense. Trumbull himself put it more bluntly, quote, "I reversed engineered the story around the efficiencies of the process so it hit the sweet spot between throwing up and being thrilled." 2 years, 200 people, $16 million, and 4 minutes and 11 seconds of film. 13 stories tall, windowless, standing like a monolith at the heart of the park. Inside were 2 identical OMNIMAX domes linked by a central foyer. Each dome held an 84-foot diameter screen. This was 12 tons of perforated material containing 72 million holes so that sound could pass through. These were the largest screens of their type in the world. Each took 6 months to construct. And there were 24 DeLorean vehicles, 12 per dome, and they were arranged on 3 staggered tiers so that no rider could see another vehicle. I love this image because you can see just how close these vehicles were to each other, but because of the opaque windows, you couldn't see the car next to you. You thought you were there. Each DeLorean held 8 passengers, 2 rows of 4, and each was mounted on 3 pistons that could raise, lower, and tilt the vehicle in any direction. Now, this building could process 2,000 people per hour. Every 6 minutes, there was a new cycle, the capacity of a small concert venue running continuously all day. The exterior was themed as the Institute of Future Technology. This was Doc Brown's laboratory, and the story began the moment you walked inside. Now, the pre-show was 45 minutes of material was filmed for the queue. It was written by Peyton Reed and Mark Cowan. Now, Reed had directed the making of documentaries for Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. He knew the characters inside out. He knew the canon, and he saved the ride from what would be a terrible mistake. Now, the original plan was that the antagonist would be Doc Brown's evil twin brother. Reed and Cohen killed the idea immediately. Hey, quote, "You have a great antagonist already. It's Biff. Plus, Tom Wilson's a great guy, and we really want to have him in this. He's always in a great mood and always up for anything." Bob Gale, in fact, the co-creator of the Back to the Future movies, confirmed Peyton was there protecting the canon of the franchise. I'm sure he said, "Everybody knows Doc Brown doesn't have an evil twin brother. They would have put him in the movie if he did. Everybody wants to see Biff." Well, Biff came and Christopher Lloyd reprised Doc Brown. And Reed says, this wasn't a guy who was going through the motions and taking the money because it was just some ride. Chris was all in. It was so fun to be able to write in Doc Brown's voice and see Christopher Lloyd deliver the goods. Michael J. Fox was asked to reprise Marty McFly as Doc's personal assistant, in fact. Now, he turned it down because he was too busy with his film career. Well, he appeared in archive footage in the films. Alan Silvestri, the great composer, scored it. The same composer who scored all 3 films. He assembled what he called the out-of-time orchestra, 98 musicians. And the pre-show told you everything you needed to know. Doc Brown has founded the Institute of Future Technology. He's built an 8-passenger DeLorean. Now, Biff Tannen has broken in, stolen his DeLorean, and vanished in a time. You have to chase him, reach 88 miles per hour, and bump him back to the present. Now, you're in the DeLorean, 8 people, 2 rows of 4. The gull wing doors close. The garage is dark. You can hear the hydraulics humming beneath you. Doc Brown's face appears on a small dashboard monitor. He's frantic. Biff had stolen a DeLorean. You have to go chase him, reach 88 miles per hour, and bump him back to the present. While the vehicle lurches forward, electric sparks. You accelerate, and then the garage doors open, and you start rising 8 feet up into the dome. Smoke clears, and suddenly, there's no room. There's no building. There are no other riders. There's only the sky above Hill Valley in the year 2015, and it is everywhere. Above you, around you, below you. The screen is 84 feet across, and it wraps past the edges of your peripheral vision. You can't find the frame. There is no frame. You are inside the image at that point. Wind hits your face. The DeLorean banks. The hydraulics throw you sideways. And at that point, you're flying. Now, for those of you who haven't been on the ride, I really want to show you some footage. So let's see if I can. I'll try and play the whole ride, and I'll interject a few comments here and there.
Don't forget, when you see Biff in the DeLorean, accelerate to 88 miles per hour and bump him. Accelerating now to 55 miles per hour, 65, 75, 85, 80 miles per hour! Hill Valley in the year 2015. And there's Biff. Let's get him. Oh.
Now, I want to remind you, this is what they built in the textile mill. Those buildings, the ones that were flying past, they were 3 feet tall and covered in tiny lights. That camera move was a motion control boom extending straight out into the miniature set. And somewhere over to the right, if you look fast when we hit the clock tower, there's that coffee cup, 1 story tall. Nobody noticed it until it was too late.
And bump him. Hill Valley in the year 2015. And there's Biff. Let's get him. Oh, wow. Big high towers now, dog chance.
Oh, yeah, that's what you think. Whoa. Gotta get some gas, Doc. I'm up here, Doc. Going down. Down. Going up. Going down. Going up. Hello. Not a no. Okay, then. Hey, Doc. Great Scott. Here's my new house. You like it? Up. Turn left. Look out. Like circles around you buttheads. Oh, Doc. Watch for traffic.
I think we've got him.
Hey, Doc.
Bump him. Faster.
Sucker.
Biff got away. Looks like we're headed 1,000,000 years back in time. And that's Hill Valley below us in the ice age.
You back?
Now, just to interject, the fiberglass that they used for the ice, they chose it because real ice doesn't actually glow on camera. Fiberglass does, however. It catches light that the way ice catches sunlight. And that crevice you're falling through at this point, they broke open the floors of the textile mill to build it. Remember, 2-3 levels deep.
Again? Come on in.
Pull up, boom!
Kaboom! Hill Valley High School buttheads.
Jump us before this crevasse starts. Oh my!
Boom!
Ambulance!
Oh, was it scaring you? Huh? See you later. Take care.
Blast! The engine's dead! Uh-oh! Everybody lean back! No, lean right! Wait! Oh no! Hold on! Come on, baby! Start! Yahoo! I'm going faster!
Now, just keep in mind, there's no CGI that you're watching. Everything's practical here, which is phenomenal. Now, the image, of course, has been upscaled to 4K. Credit, by the way, to Retro Recipes and Commodore Online. They've created a great upscale of this. But I want you to remember, this is all practical effects.
In there, volunteers! Headed toward that volcano!
Hello, buttheads.
Hey, you guys don't know when to give up, do you?
Prepare yourselves, people. I suspect that the primeval hill valley that we're about to enter could be a pretty rough place.
Hello? Anybody home?
Great Scott, a dinosaur!
Hello?
It's a Tyrannosaurus Rex!
Come on. Come on, Gramps, right this way.
Now sick 'em!
Now, this dinosaur we've got to talk about. This dinosaur, like I mentioned, was 7 feet tall, and he moved at 2 frames a second during filming. At playback speed, it's terrifying, of course. The lava that you see Methyl cellulose was a food additive. It looked like lava, but it smelled like a dumpster.
Calm down, big fella. Calm down. Easy, boy. Easy, boy. Hey, I'm hit.
I know this. What in wait? Watch those jaws. Oh! We've been swallowed. There he goes.
Doc, my buck's capacitor's out, Doc. Help me. Doc, hey, please, Doc, help me. Hey, please. I'm in here waterfall, Doc. It's a lava flow, Doc. Help me.
Hang on, Dick. Hold on. Accelerate 88 miles per hour. Bump him. We bumped him. The impact between the two vehicles should send us straight back to the Institute.
Now, that building we just crashed through, the Institute of Future Technology, this was a miniature of the building that you're sitting in. The last shot of the ride puts you back where you started.
Thanks, Doc Brown. You saved my life. Boy, man, get to me,
You did it!
Whoop. You didn't see that. Now, at this point, of course, the gull wing doors open, back in time from Huey Lewis and the news is playing. You step out. Your legs are unsteady and you're grinning. Now, what you just watched on your screen was not what 61 million people experienced, of course. Not even close. Because a flat rectangle that you're watching right now strips away everything that made this ride the ride. The wind hitting your face during the Hill Valley chase, 10,000 watts of sound pouring through 72 million holes in the screen, frequency injection making the DeLorean's floor feel like cobblestones, then ice, then rock. The hydraulics throwing you at 1G of acceleration. The dome was so large that your peripheral vision couldn't find its edge. What you just watched was a video, but what you experienced was a place. The image wrapped past the edges of your vision. There was no edge, in fact. There was no frame. There was no screen. What if you were really there? For 4 minutes and 11 seconds, you were. May 2nd, 1991, Universal Studios, Florida. Cost $40 million. Now, Peter Alexander, who had left Universal for Six Flags by this point, came back for the opening. He ran into Spielberg's wife, Kate Capshaw. He told him, Steven brought George Lucas here just to shove it down his throat. How much better this is than Star Tours. So I sure hope you did a good job. Well, later, Alexander spotted George Lucas and Steven Spielberg coming down the exit ramp. George Lucas was mad as hell, while Steve was grinning ear to ear. The dare, made 5 years earlier on a golf cart at King Kong Encounter, was answered. Phil Hedema says, the first moment when you lift up into that dome and the smoke clears, it's one of the all-time great theme park moments. And then you're flying. Irish Feisey says, the lasting memory for me at the opening was watching people exiting with smiles on their faces. It was touching and at times overwhelming. Now, the ride arguably saved Universal Studios Florida. This park had opened in 1990 to widespread complaints, in fact. Broken attractions, bad experiences, a reputation for failure. Back to the Future, the ride gave tourists a reason to come. And one analysis called it, quite literally, the reason Universal Studios Florida exists at all. Bob Gale says it put Star Tours in the dust. Now, this ride ran 16 years at 115% of park capacity. Per minute of film, it was probably the highest costing movie ever made, and it earned back every single cent. June 12th, 1993, Universal Studios Hollywood cost $60 million. Foundation issues had cost 2 years of delays and massive overruns. This building, as you may recall, replaced the old Battle of Galactica show structure. The opening was a Hollywood event. Steven Spielberg was there. Michael J. Fox Mary Steenburgen, Leah Thompson, Tom Wilson. Bob Gale brought Ice-T. They were making the movie Trespass together at the time. Now, the Hollywood version needed additional pre-show footage, and the budget was only $50,000. David DeVos, the coordinator, called in friends from USC. One was Rob Letterman, who would later direct Shark Tale and Detective Pikachu. For sound effects, Letterman called another friend. You may know this name, J.J. Abrams, who did the work in his basement. The future director of Star Wars The Force Awakens was doing sound effects in his basement for a theme park pre-show. Well, these mushrooms that my grandfather talked about, they kept growing. Everyone who touched this ride went on to change the industry. Peyton Reed, who'd saved the ride from Doc's evil twin, would direct Ant-Man. Sherry McKenna, who fought to get Trumbull hired, would co-found Oddworld Inhabitants and create one of gaming's most beloved franchises. Phil Hedema would help create the Spider-Man ride at Islands of Adventure. This was, of course, the next quantum leap in themed entertainment. And Bob Gale, he says, once the ride was up and running, when I still had an office in Universal, sometimes at lunch, I'd say to my assistant, let's skip lunch and go on the ride. We'd walk to the back lot and walk over to the ride, and they'd say, hey, Bob, how's it going? Then they'd cut me into the front of the line, and I'd go on it. For years at lunchtime, the co-creator of Back to the Future would walk over and travel through time. That's the small human version of triumph. Not a premiere, not an award, not George Lucas being mad as hell, just a man skipping lunch to ride his own movie. Now, by the early 2000s, the ride popularity was fading. The year 2015 was once a distant future in the films, was getting closer every day. This vision of flying cars and hoverboards was losing its futuristic luster. The original plan had been very smart. Refresh the ride every 5 to 7 years with new footage, keeping the DeLorean vehicles and the OMNIMAX infrastructure, but updating the experience. It's what Star Tours would eventually do decades later. Bob Gale says, but the Universal guys, they were cheap. They wouldn't spend the money on that, but they would dismantle the whole thing and spend the money to make it into the Simpsons ride instead. On September 7th, 2006, Universal Studios Florida officially confirmed what fans had been dreading. Back to the Future, the ride, was closing. On March 30th, 2007, Florida gave its final rides. August 2, 2007, Hollywood held a farewell event. Christopher Lloyd returned. Bob Gale was there. A convoy of DeLoreans arrived en masse. Fans were driving their own stainless steel time machines to say goodbye. Universal offered a contest. The grand prize was an original 1981 DeLorean with about 60,000 miles on it. September 3, 2007 was Labor Day. The Hollywood location gave its final ride. Over 61 million visitors had passed through the Institute of Future Technology in 14 years. Gale said, it's a crime that Back to the Future, the ride, isn't there anymore. He was there for the last day. He says, it was gut-wrenching. David DeVos says, every time I walk into the park now and I see the Simpsons spread all over our baby, I have to contain myself. Now, Peyton Reed, the writer who'd killed Doc's evil twin, who protected the franchise canon, who would go on to direct Ant-Man, went back one last time. It was 2007. They announced 1 month left. His niece was visiting from out of town. They got passes to Universal. Well, Reed told her, we've got to go on the Back to the Future ride. I rode this ride years ago, and it's going to close soon. He was super excited, but going through the halls, he felt something shift. Oh, this is kind of dated. And the ride itself, the film was kind of faded and scratched. Afterward, he asked his niece, that was cool, right? She said, yeah, we should go get a pretzel. Reed says, I kind of wish I had not gone it that last time, but hey, in its heyday, it was really something. What if you were really there? For 16 years, you were. The film faded, the screen scratched, but one day you couldn't be there anymore. The Simpsons ride opened in May 2008 in the same building using the same ride system. But it paid tribute. In the Q video, an animated Doc Brown voiced by Christopher Lloyd, He returned one more time, tries to save the Institute of Future Technology from foreclosure. Professor Frink crashes back in time in a DeLorean and accidentally crushes the banker who is going to sign the deal. Doc Brown says, "Now I'll have to sell the Institute of Future Technology to that mercenary clown." Krusty the Clown plants his sign over the IFT logo. Doc holds the door for him. Krusty tells Doc that he can tear tickets at the front gate, even after he gets a haircut. "Fine by me. It takes me 3 hours every morning just to get it like this." The fictional transition mirrored the real one, with grace, with humor, with Christopher Lloyd's voice one last time saying goodbye. Douglas Trumbull, we need to return to. He died on February 7th, 2022. He was 79 years old. Mesothelioma at a hospital in Albany, New York. He had been in poor health for 2 years, a stroke and cancer, but he hadn't stopped. On his property in the Berkshires, he was still building. He was still developing new tools. His final project was called Magi, a system for shooting and projecting 3D at 4K resolution and 120 frames per second. This was decades after the studio's rejected ShowScan. He was still trying to make the screen disappear. The Academy eventually honored him, a Gordon E. Sawyer Award, an honorary Oscar for technical achievement. The Science Fiction Hall of Fame inducted him in 2010, but the recognition always came late and sideways. Years earlier, upon receiving the Tesla Award, named for Nikola Tesla, the inventor, Trumbull had noted dryly that, well, Tesla died penniless after lots of people took credit for his work. Then he added, "I hope it doesn't turn out that way for me." His wife, Julia, said, "May your spirit soar as you ride the deep space that you imagined so well." His ashes were sent to space on a mission called the Enterprise flight, alongside those of Majel Barrett and Nichelle Nichols of Star Trek. The man who created the Stargate at 25 went through one himself. What if you were really there? He spent 58 years asking that, and now he is. Somewhere past the Stargate, past the dome, past every screen he ever tried to dissolve, really there. Now let's talk about what this ride achieved and how it measures up. I need to acknowledge something pretty unusual. We're rating an attraction that no longer exists. We can't write it. We can only reconstruct the experience from our memory and testimony. And the footage, as Peyton Reed discovered, doesn't do it justice. It's missing the dome, the wind, the hydraulics, the frequency injection. You can watch the film, of course, but you can't write it anymore. So we rate the design, the intent, the craft, the choices made. This is also only the second non-Disney attraction we've rated after the studio tour last episode. Immersion. The OMNIMAX Dome was the most immersive projection environment ever built in a theme park. 270 degrees of surround coverage, wind machines, water effects, smoke, 32 independent sound systems, frequency injection translating terrain into physical sensation beneath your feet. The DeLorean vehicles were staggered across 3 tiers so that you couldn't see other riders. You believed that you were truly alone in that dome. The front section rose 8 feet out of the garage, and the moment the smoke cleared and you saw the dome, that was the moment that the screen disappeared. Where it loses a point, I have to say, the pre-show was displayed on CRT monitors in really long corridors. The immersion was front-loaded into the ride. The queue experience didn't quite match the ride ambition. So I give immersion an 8 out of 10. Storytelling. Now, this ride had a clear narrative. Chase Biff through time, bump him at 88 miles per hour, save the universe. Peyton Reed's pre-show material was faithful to the franchise. He literally protected the canon while killing Doc's evil twin. Christopher Lloyd's performance elevated every scene. And of course, Alan Silvestri's score anchored the emotion. The 4-minute, 11-second ride film told a complete 3-act story across 3 time periods with rising stakes and a satisfying resolution. This was told while the audience was being physically shaken on hydraulic pistons at 1G. This is very hard to do. The format's constraints make the clarity of the narration even more impressive. So I give it a high score as well, an 8 out of 10. Delight. That first moment when you lift up out into the dome and the smoke clears, Phil Hedema called it one of the all-time great theme park moments. The coffee cup Easter egg, Doc Brown's closing line, "The future is what you make it." The exit music, "Back in Time" by Huey Lewis, the DeLorean and the Jules Verne locomotive on display outside, and the fact that the co-creator of the franchise skipped lunch just to ride it. And this, people wept. People wept when it closed. Over 61 million visitors had ridden it. Grown adults cried at a farewell ceremony for a simulator ride. That's not engineering. That's not spectacle. That's love. That's a 9. So geometric mean of 8, 8, and 9 is 8.3. This is one of the highest scores we've given, firmly in the upper echelon of everything we've rated on this show. And arguably, it's the most influential attraction we've covered. Every modern screen-based ride descends from this one, whether it's Spider-Man, Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, Flight of Passage. They are all children of the OMNIMAX dome that Douglas Trumbull built in a textile mill. So this ride changed what theme parks could be. It proved that a simulator could surpass a roller coaster. It proved that a movie-based ride could be a park's anchor attraction. It proved that a 4-minute film could be worth $60 million. Phil Hedema said this ride helped put Universal on the map, and it foreshadowed what we would do with Islands of Adventure, which really elevated Universal's profile to a close to Disney level experience. And it proved something else, something that mattered way more than any of that. It proved that the man that Hollywood kept rejecting, the Oscar it didn't share, the show scan it wouldn't adopt, the brainstorm it tried to bury, it could find his audience. Not in a movie theater, not at the Academy Awards, in a theme park, in a building with no windows, where 61 million people sat in DeLoreans and for 4 minutes and 11 seconds believed that they were traveling through time. My grandfather said the designer's job is to reach the audience through every avenue: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. He said, those are the only ways I can get to you, and to not use them is wasteful. Well, a young man named Doug Trumbull learned that lesson, and he spent 58 years building machines to fulfill it. The slit scan machine in London, the cloud tanks for Close Encounters, the fiber optic cityscapes of Blade Runner, the OMNIMAX dome and a textile mill. Each one was a different answer to the same question. What if you were really there? And for 61 million people who sat in DeLoreans and felt the wind and heard the thunder and watched the screen disappear around them, he answered it.
I think that we're at the beginning. I think really we're at the beginning. And I think once you see that book and that input, you would know even more than we know right now that we're at the beginning.
Now, I mentioned a trivia question at the beginning. In the ride's pre-show, who was originally supposed to be the main antagonist? Well, you heard it already. The answer is Doc Brown's evil twin character. Thankfully, that never came to be. Again, I'd like to encourage you to go to our website, www.grandandmiraculous.show. Please vote. The code tonight is BIFF, B-I-F-F, and let me know what your thoughts are. Now, don't go yet, because I want to do something very special. I mentioned this in the teaser to the show. Before we look ahead to the next show, I want to introduce you, someone in our community who keeps the DeLorean dream alive in a very, very literal way. Let me bring on our dear friend, Mr. Dave Stragant. Hey, Dave, thanks for being here. I really appreciate you coming on.
I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So you have a very, very rich story to tell when it comes to Back to the Future and the DeLorean and things like that. Can you share a little bit with us about your passion for this movie and what it brought you to?
Well, one thing that was interesting is I saw Back to the Future before it hit the theaters. There was a thing called Universal Moviegoers Club that used to send you a flyer every month, and it would be a preview of a movie. And I got one probably April or May of '85 before the movie came out. And I imagine it was pretty much the same as the finished movie, but I do recall that the ending was in black and white. I tried to figure that out at one point. I thought it might have to do with something. Did the 50s follow him back and is he in black and white? But really what it was, is I found out later, it was a rough cut that they were probably watching the audience's reaction to something in that particular section and hadn't finalized it for the film. Right. So it was kind of interesting. And, everybody in the theater loved the movie right from the start. I mean, it was huge, but it didn't come out for months. So it was hard. And especially when the next day I went to one of my neighbors who had a DeLorean and had to tell him about, okay, the movie, there's Reverend Jim and Alex P. Keaton, and they went back in time in the DeLorean, and it was 1950s. It was a bit overwhelming for him. And especially as the movie came out. And, if you have a DeLorean, you constantly get asked about the flux capacitor and get called McFly and everything else. So he was kind of a quiet guy, and he got rid of the car after that. I think it kind of drove him away from it.
Sure. Now you have a DeLorean yourself, right? When did you get it? And was it the movie that encouraged you to get it, or what?
I've always been a car guy. So I got it in 1999, and it was it looked like the one that got hit by the train at the end of the first one. It was pretty bad and totally torn apart, and took a while to put back together. But with it, there's certain movies and cars in movies that they're just like forever completely linked. I mean, you can't see a black Firebird from the 70s without thinking Smokey and the Bandit.
Sure.
Or my props here.
There you go. You got your props ready.
See these, and I don't, for people that are horror fans, you see some of these, and it immediately brings you to that point. And one of the things you were mentioning is like, what if you were really there? And for a lot of it, it's you are really there, and you're really driving. So it's kind of putting you really into the movies when you have one of those cars.
Sure.
And even, I am a fan of the movie, but I'm not a super fan. I'm not focused on the movies. I have some collectibles, but not a lot.
Sure.
But one of the things that's amazing to me is that this movie came out in 85, and we go to a car show, and a 5 or 6 year old will come running up and say, it's the Back to the Future car.
Right.
Everybody knows it still. And that franchise is incredible, and that everyone knows it. So it's pretty amazing that it's carried on that way.
Totally. It's definitely almost a character in itself in the film, and everybody remembers it as such. Now, do you have any memories of the attraction? Did you go on it a million times, or once or twice?
Well, it's a little far from Pittsburgh, but
yeah,
we did go on it a few times. And well, the first thing that strikes you if you actually have one is that it's got a lot more room. 8 seats would be nice.
That's true.
It's a 2-seater, and it's a light 2-seater. It's a small car. And I see Karen Cook mentioned that she always hit her head on the door when she was getting in and out, and that is something that happens all the time with the DeLorean. Sure. If you're anything higher or taller than about 5'4", you're going to hit your head at some point.
Right.
So,
yeah, sounds good. And
yeah,
just
the ride
curiosity,
itself.
how you having a DeLorean yourself, I imagine that the community is really tight knit. You guys have events or anything that you attend or anything like that?
We do. There were some much larger ones in the past where we would actually have stars from Back to the Future that would come in. Christopher Lloyd, Mayor Goldie Wilson, Principal Strickland, Claudia Wells, who was Jennifer Parker.
Right.
She was many of them. And you also had a lot of the Back to the Future people would kind of follow that. There'd be the two crowds that would kind of converge.
Sure.
The huge Back to the Future super fans and the DeLorean fans.
Awesome.
The same shows.
Oh, that's great. Well, I know that I couldn't talk. Go ahead.
Oh, no, one of the things I did some numbers actually, and it was kind of funny. They made about 9,000 cars originally. There's about 6,000 to 6,500 left on the road. And there's 100 plus replicas of the Back to the Future car that have been converted. That means that 1% of the cars out there are now Back to the Future cars and climbing. There's about one a month being made. So it's
I have a feeling
amazing.
that as these cars age, as we all do, and these wonderful pieces of equipment age, they'll probably be turned into more Back to the Future cars over time. Put that Mr. Fusion on the back and do all of that. So, hey, there it is. See? Yeah. Okay. You're legitimately a super fan. It's all good. Dave, I couldn't talk about this episode without inviting you on. I know about your love for this stuff. So I'm really appreciative, not only for your ability to come on tonight, but also for your support for this show. It means a ton to me. And I hope that this connects us a little closer to our community. So thanks again for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. Love to be on. So thanks again.
You bet. Thanks, Dave. So where are we going from here? Again, remember, the future is what you make it, and sometimes what you park in your garage, right? Well, this episode, we talked about putting you inside the image, a dome, a projector, a screen so large that it disappeared. But before Doug Trumbull, before OMNIMAX, before anyone tried to surround you with light, one man asked a much more fundamental question. Not, what if the screen disappeared, but what if you didn't need a screen at all? What if, instead of projecting an image around you, you put something real in front of you, something that breathed, something that stood up from a chair and looked you in the eye? 1964, the New York World's Fair. Walt Disney built a machine made of metal and rubber and paint, and he asked it to do something no machine had ever done before. He asked it to be Abraham Lincoln. My grandfather once painted a portrait of Lincoln, The Burden of War, showing him deep in thought, alone in the White House with the weight of the nation on his shoulders. Walt Disney tried to do something my grandfather did with paint, make you feel that Lincoln was really there, not projected, not on a screen, in the room with you, breathing. Great moments with Mr. Lincoln, next time on Grand and Miraculous. We close, as we always do, with words from Ray Bradbury. Gather round the next great campfire. Let us seek and know and understand and dream a new book, a new instruction book to fly great spaceship Earth through the uncharted seas of the future world. Lock in a dream that is your own. Find what truth is in your blood and beat a path from here to there. Your life is yours to own and be. The world is yours to shape and change. The stars are yours as just reward. The man who spent 58 years, Doug Trumbull, asking one question: what if you were really there? From a sheet of metal with a slit in it in a London studio to an 84-foot dome in a Massachusetts textile mill. Hollywood rejected his answer at every turn. The Oscar, show scan, brainstorm. He found his audience in a theme park, and his ashes went to space, into the Stargate itself. Steven Spielberg, the world is yours to shape and change. The Dare Taker. Lucas said Universal could never match Disney. Spielberg took that personally. He swore he'd never work with Trumbull again, and then told the executives, if there's one person on the planet I trust to do stuff that we don't know how to do, it's Doug. And when the ride opened, he brought Lucas just to shove it down his throat. The Dare answered, the world reshaped. And my grandfather, John F. DeCuir Sr., a production designer who built a special effects camera in Madrid, a machine that could place an actor into any world that you can imagine, from a bomber turret and James Bond money. Stanley Kubrick borrowed it for 2001. A young man named Doug Trumbull learned on it. The mushrooms that he mentioned started to grow, and decades later, his grandson stands here telling you about it. Because the avenues that my grandfather mapped are the same ones that wind, water, smoke, and 10,000 watts of sound used to reach you in a DeLorean. The future is what you make it, Doc Brown said that. Trumbull believed it. My grandfather lived it. What if you were really there? For 61 million people, you were. Good night, everybody.